Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, August 18th, and time for the AM edition of C2-A-Days from Campus to Canton. I am Nicholas Ian Allen. Should be a relatively quick show this morning. As we've discussed before, one of the themes that I've noticed in trying to go through and find new information uh, over the last really week, but 24 hours especially. I'm seeing a lot of mentions, from a beat reporter or a site that covers the team very closely that gives the little intro, the normal, what the item is going to discuss for the most part, but also make sure to mention in the first paragraph or two that more often than not, it's the last open practice or the last media viewing opportunity of fall camp. So don't be surprised if these shows get a little bit shorter or the numbers are a little bit lower in terms of real news nuggets that we get. Nevertheless, we will of course try to find as much information as possible. And for this morning in particular, it gives us a little bit of an opportunity to talk about a couple of the teams in relation to our recently finalized player projection numbers. So our statistical projections, our team projections, all 133 teams are now available to members of Campus to Canton and the C2C Winning Edge tier. Do have a few other housekeeping items to finish in that database, and then we'll be doing some tweaking based on news and things like that. As if we need to make a move on a particular player who's projected as QB1 or RB2 or wide receiver 2, whatever. But for the most part, the numbers themselves are not really going to change much. And getting started with Wake Forest, Les Johns of the Demon Deacon Digest mentioned that a player who comes out really quite high in our quarterback projections and our CFF projection rankings as far as points per game, Mitch Griffiths. Apparently had a stomach virus that has been going through the team a little bit, so was not available for Thursday night's scrimmage. Did make a quick note in Johns's rundown, which does a great job there, of course, and gives a lot of detail, often play-by-play, that Justice Ellison was the running back at the beginning of the scrimmage, got the first carry, I think got the first few carries in action. Not really a surprise there, but good to know that it seems that Ellison is, as expected, the top ball carrier entering the season. Michael Kern, Griffith's top backup, according to Connor O'Neill of Deacons Illustrated, put together a really strong performance, 15 of 20 passing for 172 yards and a touchdown. All the usual suspects were involved in the passing game on the receiving end. Didn't see anything to indicate, a real pecking order at receiver. Our projected top three is Jamal Banks, Tyler Morin, and Keyshawn Williams, though Wesley Grimes and Walker Merrill were both mentioned in the write-up as well, and expect that they will be players who are factoring in that passing attack. But I bring up Griffiths and his projection because now that we have all 133 teams in there and all projected starting quarterbacks, it's official, at least as of right now, that Griffiths is currently projected as our QB 11. That's a little bit of a surprise. And part of the reason that I like to do the projections is because if you haven't heard me describe them anywhere before, I throw together as much as I can find in a 3-year window related to the team itself, its history in the major statistical categories, the offensive coordinator, and the head coach. And do weight the offensive coordinator's history more. Do go in and include information at the FCS level or lower levels. If an offensive coordinator specifically is moving up, head coach as well. So it gives a pretty good idea on things like pace, total number of plays. We do now have pace projections for all 133 teams. So I'm sure we'll discuss those at a future date in a little more detail. But I really like to just step back, let the numbers speak for themselves, do a weighted average in those 3-year windows, and just see what history tells us. And then the projections, I don't necessarily consider them gospel by any means. There are definitely some cases where they differ from my own personal rankings, thinking of a fantasy perspective. But also, I think they do a pretty good job of something that's a little bit of a blind spot for me often is players who are stepping into an established system. For me, it's kind of a big hurdle to get over. Not always. I mean, if anybody who knows has drafted with me so far this year knows I'm all over Joe Milton. He's one of my personal favorites. Well, according to our projections, Griffiths actually ends up a couple of spots ahead of Joe Milton and ahead of another one of my personal favorites, Tyler Shuck. So a lot of that is based on, both of those teams, Tennessee and Texas Tech, had a little more injury history in the past. And so sometimes that does impact the projected snap percentage for a particular player. But typically, the only instance where I'll step in and put my thumb on the scale, so to speak, is if I think that mostly a quarterback, but sometimes a running back as well, if they're just out of, just way too low because they are a heavy favorite to start, I'll move that percentage up a little bit if it's getting dragged down by some history issues from the past. At the running back position, sometimes we, based on news, give somebody a little bit extra or a little bit less if it seems that it's going to be potentially a little more of a split as far as their workload in the past. But anyway, getting back to the point, Mitch Griffiths. Right now, according to our CFB Winning Edge preseason stat projections, which do take into account strength of schedule, do take into account returning production, QB 11, and expect him to throw for a little less than 3,400 yards. Looks like 31 touchdowns, 10.5 interceptions. And from a fantasy points per game perspective, I am talking 6-point passing touchdowns. That's my default. He would average 32.06 points. If we are to go to 4 points passing touchdown, which we do offer as well, he'd be a little lower, QB 13, but still probably higher than he's getting drafted more often than not. In these projections, like I said, higher than Joe Milton, higher than Jaden Daniels of LSU, right around the same level as KJ Jefferson, Tyler Shuck, not far behind Kyle McCord and Michael Penix. So just another piece of information to be aware of with these stat projections. But hopefully Griffiths will be back and healthy soon. Hopefully that stomach virus will stop having an impact on the Demon Deacons as a whole as they look forward to week 1. Quick note from Washington State and CougFan.com tweet yesterday about right tackle Fiali Faume, who is projected to start. We mentioned about a week or more ago that Washington State had suffered a couple of injuries on the offensive line that looked like they could be significant. Multiple projected starters potentially impacted, and sounds like, according to CougFan, that Faume is going to be ready to roll next week. The other injury issue worked itself out as well, sounds like. That was Christian Hilborn, who could play tackle, guard, but is also back and practicing, it seems. At Michigan State, Chris Solari of the Detroit Free Press noted that the heights and weights and things of that nature had changed on the Michigan State roster and wanted to offer, try to gain a little bit of information if possible from those adjustments. The thing that maybe stuck out a little bit more, and as it relates to the Big Ten Network media crew who would come through East Lansing recently, noted that Noah Kim, who is in a competition to for that starting job with Caden Hauser, is still listed at 185 pounds, a little bit light, and in fact would be 10 pounds lighter than the lightest starting quarterback in the Big Ten last season, which was Casey Thompson at Nebraska when he played at 195. Hauser is, not putting on a ton of weight, but listed at 6'3", 215 pounds. And according to Jared DiNardo, the former Indiana head coach and has been a commentator for the Big Ten Network for a long time now, said, quote, "I couldn't separate them. Other than physically, they separate a little bit. Hauser is the bigger of the two." So height and weight obviously don't necessarily impact who the better quarterback is. But this time of, fall camp, we try to find what we can, and the good folks like Solari who are covering the Spartans on a daily basis need to find things to write about. So new heights and weights. Sometimes, in the off season, we definitely will pay attention if a running back is up 10 pounds, gets over that 200-pound threshold is usually a big deal. And on that note, Nathan Carter, the transfer from UConn, has apparently added 10 pounds and is now 5'10" and 200. So he is the lighter of the likely top three running backs for the Spartans this year. Jalen Berger is listed at 215 still, and Jaron Mangum apparently is now up to 235. So interesting, of course, to see how that group works out as far as workload, because a couple of years ago, Kenneth Walker, really, really excellent year, obviously. And we'll see how it, factors into whether or not Carter is big enough to carry a heavy workload. If that's going to impact his ability to challenge Berger specifically is my projected number one there. But I know there are some folks who are definitely excited about Carter as well. Final note this morning: there was a scrimmage earlier in the week at Georgia Southern. Josh Aubrey of the Statesboro Herald wrote about it and said that it was a little bit of a struggle for the offense. And Georgia Southern is an offense that we're pretty high on, as a whole. A lot of production in the passing attack, expecting multiple wide receivers to be fantasy relevant and perhaps even, at a really, really high level. And one of those receivers was apparently the brightest offensive, bright spot of this scrimmage, and pretty much any write-up I've seen of Georgia Southern so far in fall camp, it's been Terrace Burgess, who is making big plays, had the one touchdown catch, high level of difficulty, according to Aubrey, but also, and I thought this was important to note, it really helps to show that Burgess is back to 100%, because we forget, or I do at least, that he ended his season early last year with a broken leg in the game against Louisiana. So the fact that he is back 100% and being the top playmaker, pretty much any opportunity the media gets to see, at least, is good news. And then, David Brin, top 25 quarterback in our updated QB rankings. And let's look at the PPR rankings for Georgia Southern. Derwin Burgess, a little low, maybe 38th, but would not surprise me at all to see him inch up a bit higher than that. Probably, Caleb Hood being a almost number one is what might actually be limiting Burgess just a little in our projections. But see, there's a case of, you see what our projections are. It may or may not jive with your priors, but it's another piece of information to apply. and consider. That's at least how I use them. So if you want access to all 133 teams, that includes coaching history. You can look through and see the offensive coordinators last 3 years at the quarterback position, running back, wide receiver, tight end, running, passing, all of it. The team, the head coach as well. We also do coach history, just as far as who's been where for the last 15 years, all the way back to 2005. So if you want just a quick way to access who's been or what is this coach's background specifically, we try to give that information easily available as well. So do check us out, campus2canton.com, the C2C Winning Edge tier for access to those statistical projections, as well as our team profiles, which update projected point spreads automatically every day. Projected depth charts for all 133 teams are there as well. Roster strength, team performance history, head coach ratings, all kinds of great stuff. And then, of course, our returning production database is available also to folks in that tier. So hope everyone has a wonderful Friday. We will, I'm sure, have a little bit more news to discuss as we prepare for what should be another busy weekend of scrimmages. We'll have to, of course, wait and see how much information comes out of those weekend scrimmages, because availability and media viewing does appear to be somewhat limited right now. But we'll cross our fingers, and we will be back this afternoon, and then, of course, again on Monday.